O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all thy sons command. Car ton bras s'est porté l'épée, il s'est porté la croix. Ton histoire est une épopée de plus brillant exploit. God keep our land glorious and free. All Canada we stand on guard for thee. All Canada we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you, Mr. Longfellow. I appreciate your attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There's one addendum item this evening that I would like to draw your attention to. That's the addition of item 18 on your agenda, correspondence from the Royal Canadian Legion for a patio, licensed patio extension.
Thank you. Can I have a motion then to confirm the agenda? Moved by Councillor Bodnar, seconded by Councillor Doucette. Call for the question. All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest tonight? Being none from Madam Councillor Butters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm going to declare an indirect pecuniary interest tonight on item number 18 as I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56.
Any others? I would declare a conflict of interest personally for item number 3, for a similar reason. I am a member. Item number 5, because my daughter is organizing that cancer walk. And item number 6, because my son is a member of the board of directors of the Sir John Colborne Port Colborne Youth Soccer Management Club. Do I have any? Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll declare conflict with item 7 as I'm a member of the Legion. Or the Lions, sorry. Long day.
Thank you. Move on to the determination of committee items requiring separate discussion. Start on my right. Councillor Kenny.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Poll item 12. Thank you.
Item 12. Could I have a motion then to approve? Oh, we've got some more there, please.
Number 9, please.
Number 9. Councillor Demarais? No. Councillor Kenny?
Well, my fellow councillors, I'm not pulling all of them with conflicts, but I will pull 3, 5, and 6 for, I believe it was the mayor's conflicts. And if one of you could pull the other 2, that would be great. Thank you.
3, 5, and 6.
For the conflicts only. I don't want to speak to it. I just want to pull it.
Okay. Councillor Demarais?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I will pull item 7 and item 18 for the conflicts.
7 and 18. Madam Clerk, are there any items that were not pulled? Okay, then can we have a motion to approve those items that don't require separate discussion? Moved by Councillor Kenny, second by Councillor Demarais. All those in favor? Carried. We don't have any presentations this evening. We have delegations regarding, first of all, we have Nancy Savage. Rosemary Armstrong, would you come forward? Mrs. Nye. This is a presentation by the Fair Trade Committee. This is Fair Trade Week, month, and we raised the flag earlier today, the Fair Trade flag. Go ahead, Mrs. Nye, if you're going to make a presentation.
Good evening, Mayor Maloney and councillors. In 1971, I traveled with my family to the Middle East. I was 15 years old. We visited a refugee camp just outside of Amman, Jordan. I had my first encounter with fair trade, although it was not called that then. Palestinian women did intricate traditional Palestinian women did intricate traditional needlework to earn money for their families and help ease their desperate plight. Mennonite Central Committee, the relief and development organization that we were with, that took us there, took this embroidery and sold it in little shops in the US and in Canada for a fair price, and further orders were placed. Saturday, May 9th, 2015, was World Fair Trade, an occasion that is celebrated all over the world. It's a yearly event to highlight fair trade in the world. This day celebrates fair trade as a tangible contribution to the fight against poverty and exploitation, climate change, and the economic crisis, where the greatest impact is on the world's most vulnerable populations. We've come a long way since the Palestinian embroidery. Millions of producers and traders, businesses and policymakers, supporting organizations and volunteers have contributed to the substantial growth of fair trade. There are now over 1,000 towns, cities, and universities across the globe that are committed to supporting fair trade. Port Colborne was the first city in Ontario, I'd like to remind you. Toronto was somewhere down the line after us. The Fair Trade Town campaign is a grassroots movement that began in 1999 in the UK when an Oxfam group wanted to promote fair trade in Garstang. In Canada, the campaign began in 2007, and Port Colborne was third in the nation in 2009. Since then, many more towns and cities have committed to this effort. We can be proud of our status and proud to be involved in a world-changing movement.
In order to maintain our fair trade city status, which is renewable annually, our committee has the responsibility of educating and raising awareness of fair trade in Port Colborne. We make presentations to local church, schools, and community groups. We have an active Facebook page, and we serve fair trade hot chocolate during Santa's visit in December, both in the afternoon and after the parade. For the past 4 years, we have entered a float in the Santa Claus parade. This morning, along with Mayor Maloney, we hoisted our new Fair Trade City flag in front of City Hall here, and I invite you to take a look sometime when the wind is blowing. It's a beautiful flag, and it will fly for the month of May, which is designated as Fair Trade Month. Then we welcome JB Fashions as a new Fair Trade partner. On May 22nd, we will host our second Fair Trade Soiree, a celebration of our Fair Trade City, featuring the Deacons of Jazz, fair trade goodies, and great fun. This event will be held at the beautiful Roselawn Center. Tickets are only $20, and we welcome your participation.
We think it's also important to point out that fair trade and shopping locally do exist side by side. In some countries, and Canada is one of them, sixth goal has been added to the basic 5 criteria that are required to become a fair trade town. This goal is aimed at encouraging support for local and sustainable produce. Our Fair Trade Committee is an active supporter of local shopping and local produce from our farmers. In town, we have restaurants, grocery stores, cafes, and as Rosemary mentioned, clothing stores that sell fair trade products. But we recognize that shopping locally is also something that needs to always be a part of our support system. To that end, there are 2 different initiatives that we've been working with for the last couple of years. The first one that we're involved in is the Niagara Local Food Cooperative. It's an innovative marketing and distribution system for local farmers, agricultural producers, and consumers. Members of the co-op place an order online for delivery to Port Colborne every 2 weeks. Products include fruit, vegetables, meat, nuts, grains, anything that farmers produce. Our committee facilitates the local delivery of the produce to our city. Another program we're facilitating as well is with delivery in the Shared Harvest Community Program in Dunnville. This is a registered not-for-profit community farm, certified organic. Their mission is to provide families with produce that's environmentally sustainable, locally desirable, and socially responsible. They also help low-income families with subsidized food boxes. So those are just 2 of the things that we try to support on a regular basis to ensure that we not only think globally but locally.
In closing, we'd like to remind you of the part that you play. You must have representation on our committee, and we'd like to thank Barbara Butters for her participation over the last 6 years. You must serve fair trade coffee, tea, and sugar on your premises and as often as possible wherever you are represented in our town. That's all. Thank you for your commitment.
Thank you for your presentation, Jane, Nancy, and Rosemary. I wonder if you might entertain any questions that may come forward from council. Any questions of these ladies? Good question, Nancy?
I just wanted to add one thing that I think we were remiss in not mentioning, in as far as our participation with City Hall, is that we did get together with you recently and discussed how we could help facilitate the serving of those products here in City Hall, how we could make that work. We don't expect it to be put completely on somebody else's shoulders. We would like to be a part of the discussion, and I know we received information on different events that are going on in the city on the yearly basis, so that it's our responsibility to step up and try to work with City Hall so that we can fulfill our obligation as a fair trade city.
Thank you. We'll certainly put our special events group together with you, and wherever possible, we would be happy to use fair trade products. Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Appreciate your attendance tonight. This evening we have another delegation from the Christian Friends Child Advocacy Center. We have Marlene DeRose, a board member, and Lynn Jurel, current chair. Come forward, please. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. First of all, Your Worship, Mr. Maloney, and members of elected council, and to the audience members and to members of the public who are viewing this on cable TV later on. I want to say thank you very much for the opportunity to come and give you an update on what is happening with the Christian Friends Child Advocacy Center. When I was here 7 years ago to make the initial presentation, and I recognized at least 3 people around the table, you did hear me speak before. And lots of things have changed in the last few years, and we're hoping to provide that information for you so that you have a sense of the fine work that the Advocacy Center is doing for your children and for the children in every municipality across Niagara. As you know, Christian Friends was a youth of Niagara who suffered a horrific death After her murder, the French family and a very dedicated group of volunteers from the community decided that they needed to work together to provide a safe place for children and youth to disclose when they have had to suffer from abuse. And the end result of this is the fact that we now have the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center, Niagara. The primary goal of the CAC is to change the culture of investigation, and we do that by ensuring that the child disclosing the abuse is no further victimized by the intervention system that we've created for them. And we do this actually by decreasing the number of times that the child is required to tell their story. And it used to be many times in many different areas, like the police office, the Family and Children's Services, the school. Now they come to the Advocacy Center and they disclose their case there. As you can see from the overhead, in 2013, approximately 400 cases of reported child abuse were interviewed at the center by our Niagara Regional Police. That's approximately one child or one family a day. Since 2008, when we opened, we've actually had 1,900 interviews take place at our center. That to me is an absolutely startling figure. Involve children and the non-offending witnesses of violence as well that are part of that interview. It's interesting because Statistics Canada would tell you that actually we have underestimated the amount of abuse in our community because of the fact that children themselves have to go to an adult to have that case brought forward in most cases. As well, I find it interesting that across Niagara, the population of children and youth has been declining over the years, over the past 10 years, and yet the numbers of cases that we have coming forward has remained consistent throughout the 8 years. As you can see again from the overhead, the types of abuse that are reported, 60% of those cases involve sexual abuse, 34% involve physical abuse, and about 2.5% of those cases are child pornography and internet luring, which is becoming a fairly major issue with the students in our schools. Oops, sorry. You can see again, if you look at the other side of the chart, the age of the children involved. Children in the ages between 0 and 5, 20% of our interviews, between 0 and 5. It's astounding to me. Those children between the ages of 6 and 10, 26% of our interviews. And those children or youth between the ages of 11 and 15, 36% of those interviewed. Astounding statistics. The team, this is the team that works out of the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center. Our first would be Niagara Family and Children's Services. They actually have a team of a supervisor and 6 staff that work right out of our building. They are responsible, of course, to determine whether or not the child needs protection, needs to be removed from the home, or whether or not someone in the home needs to be removed away from the child. Our second partner and part of the multidisciplinary team is Niagara Regional Police. We are lucky that these two major forces work together as such an incredible team. Their role, of course, is to gather the data and the information to determine whether or not they have enough evidence to lay criminal charges. The third partner is the Family Counseling Center, Niagara. Their role, of course, is to provide support immediately to the non-offending family members and counseling services to the child. And the most wonderful part of this, and we did tell you this 7 years ago, that we would guarantee this, and it has happened, there is immediate counseling available, and there is no charge to the family, and travel arrangements or arrangements for the child to have the service come to them are in place for all of the children that come through our center. The fourth partner, of course, is the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center. And the role of the family advocate is there. And that's a staff member that we have in our building, and their role is to provide support post-investigation. So after the police have finished their investigation, then the child and the family are able to work with the family advocate to determine what next steps are available to them and how they could access those steps. Where are we? Well, we live at 8 Forester Street in North St. Catharines. Excuse me. It's a lovely community, a tree-lined area, very private. It is an area where children can come and they are quietly received and families are well respected. We have 5,000 square feet. It was an old church that we actually raised the funds to renovate, and so that is the location of our center at this time. You can see this is these are two of the rooms, our reception area, and one of the interview or one of the waiting rooms for the children. They are child friendly in the sense of the fact that they are brightly painted with very warm and welcoming sea creatures, not scary sea creatures, but warm and welcoming. And we actually have the treasure chest in there as well, because one of the things when the child is finished with their session at the Child Advocacy Center, they do get to choose a stuffed animal to take home with them. We've also been able, with a grant through the Ministry of the Attorney General, to update those areas in the last few months and make them even more appropriate for the children. So once a child is disclosed and they come to the Advocacy Center, how are the ways that we go about helping these individuals? Well, as I said, we have a multidisciplinary team, the team of FACTS, and the police have been trained specifically to do trauma-related interview style, use a trauma-related interview style. And so together, they do the interviewing of the child, and that interview is videotaped and then can go to court. And that is one of the reasons why usually they only have to tell their story once. It's a place where they can ensure, because of their special training, that the child feels safe and comfortable, because we know that when the evidence is given in that kind of environment, it is more likely to be appropriate for use in court. Again, as I said, we provide immediate support for the non-offending family members and counseling at no cost or wait list for the child. We do fall at the center with our advocate. It's very interesting because we can keep a file open or open it again several years down the line. So we have, as I say, continued support available to that family and to that child over the years. And finally, the advocate is responsible as well for running a program that we call Teen Connect. It is a program that we run in the schools for grades 7, 8, and 9. It involves a presentation from Family and Children's Services about protection, from the police about legal ramifications, from the Crown Attorney about responsibilities of citizens, and from our own family advocate about the supports that are available to them in the community. If they are being abused, if they know of someone in their family or a friend they think may be being abused, they are encouraged to report that. Because one of the pieces of information that we share is that if you are being abused, in all likelihood, so is someone else in your family or someone that you know. I think one of the important things that we need to mention again is the fact that if a child does not disclose the abuse and they do not receive appropriate treatment when they are young, what happens, the research will tell us, is that as adults they frequently suffer from addiction issues, mental health issues, and the sad part of that is frequently they also become abusers themselves. So it is very important that abuse is recognized and treated early on. First in Canada, when I came to see you the first time 7 years ago, I said to you we would be the first child advocacy center in Canada of this type. Standalone in the sense that we have our own child-friendly building. And we were. There were other centers where similar types of services were offered, but we were the first. What happened from there is that we were invited also to create an Ontario network. We were asked to do that by the Minister of Community and Social Services, and so one of our employees began that process. So we now have initiated the Ontario network, and their role is to get together various agencies and communities around this province who are interested in opening an advocacy center. and working together to create our standards and also to put forth a lobbying move, because we believe that our funding should be provincial, and so this provincial organization will take it forward. We are one of 4 open centres in Ontario, and there are 4 more in this province that are in the process of opening. They are working, as I say, to raise their funds, but they do have support from federal government of justice. In Canada, there are 24 either open now or in the process of opening. So in 7 years, that's pretty substantial. You can see from the Federal Justice Department, they are very interested in having advocacy centers, and they are working with us and with the province to try and support their growth and development across the area. And finally, I would say we are first in the sense that we brought together, we didn't gather them, we brought together the various agencies and organizations around the Niagara region who deal with programs supporting children who have been abused. And we sat down at the table, we all talked about what we did. We did a gap analysis to determine which programs or which areas of program and children and families were not supported. We figured out what the gap is, and we are now in the process as a collaborative group of people developing programs to meet those needs. So I think that's a pretty substantial move on our part, and I'm really proud that we have, as I say, agencies from all across our region. Am I here tonight asking for money? I'd like to tell you I'd like about $500,000. I know you're not going to give it to me, or not to me, but to the center. But I would like to tell you that we have put in for a hydro grant, because I understand that you do not have discretionary funds. So I do hope that you will support that. But it's also important for me to acknowledge the kind of budget that we operate under, and that is our total budget. We bought that building and had it renovated to the tune of about $759,000 7 years ago, and we now have the mortgage down to $69,000. I think that's pretty substantial. We also have a contingency fund because we decided a few years ago that we needed to make sure that we were able to move from fundraising event to a fundraising event in order to maintain the services that we do. We exist because of the community. The Niagara community has stepped up to the plate to support us. Yes, we've had Trillium grants. Yes, we've had grants from Justice Canada. But our foundations across this region, the businesses across this region, and the residents across this region have supported our center. And although we will continue to have to fundraise, because we do, we exist because the people of our communities believe that we should exist, because we are helping those very vulnerable children. Again, I mentioned our goal is to obtain sustainable funding through the province. I think I understood when I was speaking at Pelham that you have a mayor's meeting or a council meeting provincial that's coming up soon. So if that is the case, and if I understood that correctly, I hope you will lobby our MPPs and remind them that we do have this center and that we've been supporting it as a region, and that we would really encourage them as our provincial members to support us as well. The kinds of things you can do, know that we exist to serve your citizens of your municipality. Know that we do various fundraising events around the municipalities, and we hope that you would participate in those. We hope that you will talk to the members of your community and to the, I hear you have to step away from decision making today because you're on committees. When you go to those committees, talk about the center and the work that we do for your children, for their children, and talk to your families. Know about and share the information that you have about the Kristen French Child Advocacy Center, Niagara. Again, protect a child. We hope that we will do the best service that we can and provide that to the children of Port Colborne, along with our other 11 municipalities. Lynn and I are here to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you very much for your presentation.
You're welcome.
Oh, are you going to add to it?
No, I'm just stepping up to assist with
Okay.
any questions, that's all.
Members of council, do we have any questions of the presenters? Councillor Doucette and Councillor Bodner.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. Through you to the presenters, I don't see Contact Niagara anywhere in here, and I know that Contact Niagara is often the first step in getting any child, any kind of services in the Niagara Peninsula. So according to what you have there, you guys skip over Contact Niagara, is that the idea? And they can go directly to you?
They can.
Because all other services must go through Contact Niagara. That's provincially legislated.
It's true. There's a little bit of difference here in the sense that there's a protection and legal issue involved. And because of that, the police and family children's services are involved. And because Family Counseling Center works through FACS, Family Children's Services, then we actually can access them directly. When we met with all the agencies, Contact Niagara was with us, and certainly any request for counseling that goes to Pastones, which is our service provider in the Niagara region, must go through them, but we actually have the authority to provide this directly through, for children of abuse, directly through our center.
Thank you.
Councillor Bodner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Janet, thank you very much for your presentation, and I was very fortunate to be involved early on, I think 206.
206 or 207, sometime in that year.
Roy Hardman asked me if I'd consider coming on board, and I think that was just when we were purchasing the church for the...
Yes, it
and,
was.
you know, I thought then, and I still think that this is just a fantastic endeavor that should have happened years earlier. But I congratulate you for keeping it going, and I certainly, on my role as on the board of United Way, champion United Way funding going that way, and I just happen to be on the Hydro board too, which might be of some service. We'll see. You know.
Thanks.
But I just wondered whether council would consider taking this a step further. They have asked that they are trying to get the provincial funding. I wonder whether we might be able to put our voice towards that as a, you know, as a community, and encourage our provincial members of parliament to support this when it comes up. I don't know that we have to put that all together today, but I think our clerk maybe could come up with some nice wording on something we could put forward to the province. Yeah, I'll just throw that out there for council's consideration. So thanks for your presentation. It was great. Thanks.
You're welcome.
I think that council would be receptive to the position which you were advocating, Mr. Bodner, and we'll deal with that.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Is there anyone else wishing to have any questions of the presenters? There being none, thank you very much. I appreciate you being here. I believe I recall I was at the opening of your center some time ago, and I remember thinking then how impressed I was with the facility that you had so quickly, and you're carrying on great work. Thank you very much again for coming to speak with us tonight. Thank you. I don't believe we need a motion for that. We'll just do that. If I hear the rumbling over here. Next item is the mayor's report. I would just advise you of some of the events that we've done in the last 2 weeks. As mentioned earlier this evening, we had a flag raising for the Fair Trade Committee. I also hosted grades 1 and 2 from DeWitt Carter School, and represented you at Maccabi Days, which was an interesting event over the lunch hour. I attended a site tour of the Burgoyne Bridge. That's a construction project in St. Catharines, a huge, probably the biggest construction project that the region has ever experienced. But there are concerns about cost overruns, and a committee has been set up to review the finances and come up with some type of conclusion as to why there are significant cost overruns. Also, I attended a Business After 5 reception of the Chamber of Commerce at Tallwood Manor, and a kickoff reception for Showboat Theatre. There is a discussion which Mr. Barrick was unable to be with us this evening, our regional representative, but there is a lot of discussion at the region about inter-regional transit and whether we should be moving forward with it, expanding it, and with the idea that it would lead into the GO railway system when as it moves along, and that we think that would be very supportive of it, but I'll wait till Mr. Barrick comes back to give you a more fulsome discussion of that. I have provided a memo to our transit committee to review the memo as well, and perhaps they would like to make a recommendation to council on the direction we would like to take along with those communities in the region. As I said, Mr. Barrick is not with us, so we will not have a regional council report. Are there any councillors' items of new business? Mr. Bogner.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just before I get into that, I wonder whether you could take back to the region a request, and maybe they are going to do it. Miller Road and Wilhelm Road are in kind of sad shape in certain areas. And I just wondered whether you could find out whether they're on the list of repairs.
We can do that for you, Mr. Bogner.
Thank you very much. Councillor items?
Yes.
Mr. Mayor and members of council, I'm going to take my time tonight to thank someone in our community that's done some great work. And I was fortunate to be at the library this past week when Mr. William Thomas's pictures of the author series and the readings at Roseland were kind of unveiled. It is, if you haven't been there, it is fantastic. The library has done just a fabulous job, and it is really, really, it's just, you got to go see it. It really is a great spot for it, and it does, it really brings something to the library. And Mr. Thomas is in the audience tonight, but I wonder, I think we owe him a great big thank you for everything he's done. And if people don't know who Mr. Thomas is, he's certainly an author, a scriptwriter, and a nationally syndicated humor columnist. He is the author of 10 books of humor, and his weekly column appeared in 50 newspapers both here and in the States. Recently, William's work was included in the Great Canadian Anthology of Humor with the best 50 humor writers in Canada from Stephen Leacock to today. In 93-94, Bill was part of a core group that fought to get the city money and government grants in order to create the Roseland Theatre out of the former Port Colborne Club. And that in itself is a huge thing, as we can see today. As part of the vision for the new facility, he promised to start an author series. In 1994, in the President's Room at the new Roseland Center, he did the first reading himself from his book, Malcolm and Me, Life in the Litter Box. And a spoiler alert, you don't have to buy the book. In the end, she got the car and he got the cat. So just to let you know. He followed that first reading by bringing a famous bank robber, Stephen Reed, to town. Fresh out of jail, he read from his book, Jack Rabbit Parole, and the rest, as they say, is history. The rest you see on the walls of the Port Colborne Library today, photos of some of the finest writers of our time. From that first season, the Canadian Author Series flourished, moving into the 300-seat theatre, where it was sold out on every evening of William's tenure as host thereafter. In those 20 seasons, the city of Port Colborne became host to some of Canada's greatest authors, including Margaret Atwood, Pierre Burton, Mordecai Richler, Jan Wong, Farley Mowat, Alistair MacLeod, Wayne Johnson, Stevie Cameron, Lawrence Hill, humorist Alan Frothingham, and Stuart McLean. William convinced many Canadian icons to come to the Roseland stage. Lively personalities like Mike Bullard, Sandra Seamus, Peter Mansbridge, Margaret Trudeau, Roger Abbott, Rex Murphy, Colin Mockery, and Lloyd Robertson. With no bookstore in town, the series placed approximately 13,000 Canadian books into the hands of readers who otherwise probably would not have bought them. Over the years, the series Book Draw donated more than $45,000 to charities like Lakewood Easter Seal Camp, Niagara Peninsula Children's Center, Port Cares, and the United Way. Many signed copies got raffled off later at fundraisers to support literacy, humane societies, and summer theater in our area. Season subscriptions came mostly from Niagara, but also because of its high profile. Some regulars came from Woodstock, Mississauga, Buffalo, and New York. I was at one of those series and sat beside two couples from Mississauga. They said they came on a regular basis. They said, do you know what this had cost us in Mississauga? And we'd be in this huge theater and we couldn't get close to the authors. So they seen great value in this, and they were thrilled to be able to come all the way here and do that. Doug Gibson, Canada's godfather of publishing and mentor to Alice Munro, Margaret Lawrence, and Farley Mowat, traveled across Canada on his book tour and is writing a book about it. In Across Canada by Story, he will declare Readings at the Roselawn simply the best author series in the country. And that's a big deal. It's one thing to have this author series, but the spin-offs that it brings our city is tremendous. And that's part of the thank you to Bill and the people that helped him put this on. People went to restaurants before the series. Mr. Mayor, I know you attended those author series. I believe you were a subscription member. B&Bs, you know, some people stayed over. Some of the shops downtown, people like to poke around before the series, and you know, if they're in the shop, there's a good chance they could buy something. And I just wonder whether council would allow Mr. Thomas to come up just to say a few words, and I've got a couple of questions for him after, if he doesn't touch on them at, and we all know he's a man of few words, so he does have a limited time, so I just wonder whether that, Mr. Mayor, would that be okay, and members of council?
Would we wish to waive the procedure bylaw to allow this? All those in favor? Motion, Mr. Bodner, seconded by Madam Desmarais. Call for the question. All those in favor? Bill, could you come forward? Yes, there's a mic there and a little red button to push.
That'd get your good side, Bill.
We're okay on, yeah, it's good. Boy, that would have been awkward if that vote had gone against me. I got to say, what a beautiful, I won't be long, honest, Mr. Mayor. And by the way, John Maines and Vicki Maines were also faithful subscribers to that series, and I had a wonderful team of volunteers. They're still intact, it's still going, they've had a great season, and they're carrying on from there. This is a fantastic, I'm embarrassed to say I've never actually been up here in council chambers. I spent an enormous amount of time in the original City Hall after they turned it into a pub. I logged a lot of hours in that place, and we got a lot of political discussion through. I just want you to say that. There's a couple things I need to say, and that is thank you very much for Ron Bodner and his help. One thing that I used to make fun of politicians quite a bit in my column, and you may have noticed I've stopped doing that. One of the reasons is when I started this Save the Roselawn thing and Friends of the Roselawn thing, I started spending a lot of time with council people like Barb Butters and Angie Damaris, and of course, trying to get Ron out for 15 minutes between his 8:30 in the evening meeting like that. I was absolutely struck by how much time, your personal lives, you commit to making this place a better city. I was absolutely blown away. I want to thank you all for the time that you take away from your families to, as I said, do the business of the city and get it done. I will not be making fun of politicians in my column ever again. And really, now that Vance is gone, there's not that much material. And with Bob Heil leaving, I might as well just quit the column altogether. Anyhow, that's just the only thing I wanted to say. And the other thing is, I'm on a rampage as of today. I was speaking with a woman, I just met her. Her name was Mary Reeves. And I said, would you happen to be related to Roy Reeves? She said, yeah, that's my husband's father. And when I was a kid and a hockey player growing up in Dane City, Roy Reeves was my idol. My God, this guy was a Port Colborne cop. He played for the Sailors. He was built like Superman. And I started thinking, where are the great stories about Killer Kilpatrick and Roy Reeves and all these guys? Second person I ran into was Ann Kinnerly, who's now the principal at Port Colborne High. And I didn't know it at the time, but her dad and a guy by the name of Jim Foley started an author series long before I ever came to Port Colborne. It went in the 70s, it ended in 79, so it was 15 years before I started Canadian Author Series. And the only reason I know that is because Margaret Atwood said, you know, I've been to this town. And Pierre Burton, same thing. And then the lawyer, Bob Riley, told me a hugely funny story of Farley Mullet reading at the Port Colborne Auditorium and refusing to take questions until somebody got him a drink. And then Bob Riley ran over to the Port Colborne Club, a tumbler of rum, some ice, came back, and he took one shot and said, are there any questions? So I'm thinking, where the hell are all these stories? And I know where they're all. They're in boxes and attics all over the place. So I am determined. I'm looking for the young Ruby Conway. I've always been already been in touch today with Brian Ingram, a friend of mine. He's going to be the point man on this thing. I'll be very surprised if Gail Todd will not come on board and take an editorial role in this thing. I will produce it, I will publish it, but I much like I put my hand up 21 years ago at the council meeting, I guarantee you why we don't have one, I'll never know. Welland has 3 books written by Bill Lewis about the history of Port Colborne. Why don't we have one? So there you go. Within 1 to 2 years, there will be a book on the history of Port Colborne, and it will contain all the great stuff about Teeter Kennedy and the culture and everything else this town is wonderful about. We need something on the record that we can put our hands on and read and be proud of, and thanks to Ron Bodner's incentive, I'm going to do that. Wonderful. There we go. Thank you.
Bill, thank you very much for...
Thank you. We're good?
Thank you very much for being here tonight, for that little dissertation, and for putting Port Colborne on the literary map, literally.
Nice you say that.
And Lucy's restaurant as well.
Yeah, I never get free drinks. That's just a rumor.
That was a wonderful rendition that Councillor Bodner put together, and we thank him for that as well.
Some of that, John, is actually true. So,
Councillor Bodner, you have a comment?
Yeah, so my involvement isn't going to be monetary, Bill, just to let you know. I just want to put that out there right off the bat.
Ron,
all the help you want. Buddy.
Even when we go for beers, your involvement is not monetary.
Yeah, that's
Good one.
So he's not always truthful, but anyways, we'll go from there. So one of the things I think that's important, how Bill started was, when you started those readings, I think you alluded to that you obviously did your first one with, your own book, but you didn't have a lot of financial backing to get that going.
No.
You were trying to get that as you went along.
We had Maeve Railton, bless her heart, was, we had to go out and find a sponsor for every author I brought in. We didn't have a continuous sponsor. Not until, into the first, maybe second year, where Grant Thornton came on board as a permanent sponsor. But no, for the second author I brought in Stephen Reed, who was the member of the Stopwatch Gang. They were the best bank robbers in North America, bar none. And I brought him in, and Maeve said, where are we going to get a sponsor for this guy? I said, go to the banks. I said, no, really. I said, because bring the bank employees to the readings, because they should want to know about timing and alarm system and response time and stuff like that. Well, Maeve came back after going to all the banks in town, and I said, how'd it go? And she said, they don't want to sponsor a bank robber coming to town. I said, go to Meridian. Was Niagara Credit Union. I said, Frank Hanaway's a friend of mine, and I'm a member of that credit union. So she went to him. She came back from that one, and I said, they're going to sponsor? She said, no, but they're very keen to know when Stephen's coming to town and when he's leaving. So if any of you went to that reading, there was a bank guard outside the Niagara. But it was very hard to, yeah, we took a shot, you know, and there was no guarantees. But a lot of people put their hands up and made promises. Dave Hurst put his hand up and said, I'll start a jazz series. He eventually did. Of course, Don Horn and Maeve Railton and Jimmy Railton got Showboat going and things like that. So some of those things came through. But no, I think you have to take a shot. And then it became so popular that it became beneficial for a sponsor to come on board. And then we had a sponsor for a very long time. And then for families from Port Colborne sponsored it for the rest of the way. So it was very easy after that. But yeah, no, you're right, getting going, it wasn't.
Yes, Mr. Bonner.
Whole time, but I think it's important that something like that, that people can take a shot. People, if they have good ideas, bring it forward. You know, we've seen it with Bill with the author series, Showboat, you know, recently the car show. I mean, these are all things that can happen, even if you just have an idea and, you know, you don't have money behind you, bring it forward. We got great staff here. We've got counselors that'll jump on board to help. And, you know, nothing's, well, let's say almost nothing's too far out there to bring forward. You know, that's how things happen. It's just fabulous. And
Could I just one, talk about taking a shot. This is a shameless self-promotion, but it gets to Ron's point. My next book is coming out in February, and it's a story about a horse. And Monica and I spend a lot of time hiking in the figure eights and things like that. I came across this story about this incredible horse. And so the book is being published by Colin Stewart. It's the high imprint of Random House Penguin, and they're taking the unprecedented step of publishing this book out of Toronto and New York at the same time. I think it's going to be a big deal. And the pitch was, it's a thoroughbred racehorse, and the pitch was that the greatest racehorse that ever lived was Man of War. He won 20 out of 21 races. Cigar won 16 in a row and 16 out of 18. Secretariat won just about every race he ran. Northern Dance and on and on and on. The horse I'm writing the book about, Zippy Chippy, 100 in a row. Losses. This horse couldn't win a race if they fixed it. But the point is, the horse went to post 100 times. He almost won once, but he slowed down to bite the horse that was coming up behind him. So Zippy Chippy went to post 100 times and lost. His career record earnings, Secretary career record earnings were, I think, $1.7 million. In 100 times to the post, Zippy earned $30,000. And Zippy is alive today. He's at a retirement home outside of Saratoga. He has so many fans, and he had big fans then. He has so many fans that when Saratoga track is open, they go out to the retirement farm to visit Zippy Chippy. They buy his t-shirts, they buy his mugs. He's raising so much money. There are 21 horses in the retirement farm. One is Funnyside, who won the Kentucky Derby and the Preakness. One is Barons, who won $4.5 million in stakes raises. And guess who's supporting all the winners? Zippy Chippy is now the breadwinner for the retirement home. He's paying for all the vet bills, all the food, all the board. And so the point is, you don't have to come first to be a winner. And I think there's a very serious part to this book, but as Ron said, you got to take a shot and you got to persevere. I mean, if you're selling vacuum cleaners door to door and 99 doors get slammed in your face, do you really feel good about getting up the next morning to go for that 100 shot, you know? So yeah, I think there's not enough of that in small towns where we take some risk and we take some ventures and we start out small and grow and like that. So I'm done. Thank you so much, Ron. Mr. Mayor, it's good to see you again.
Thank you for your message.
Thanks very much, you guys. Thank you.
Take care.
Are there any other councillors' issues or inquiries? I'm afraid to acknowledge you, Mr. Bodner.
So, Mr. Mayor.
Bodner, then Mr. Doucette, Councillor Doucette.
Mr. Mayor, I really think that that we need to thank Bill tremendously, but also Monica. That, you know, Bill can talk really good, but Monica's a hard worker. I'm telling you, you know, like so. So thank you, Monica and Bill, for everything you've done for the community, and will continue to do in the future. Thank you very much. And just one other thing, it seems like we talked that maybe the author series is over and done and dead, but it's alive and well, and Putzi Madranic has taken that on. Mr. Mayor, I wonder whether Mr. Hakeem can tell us if there's any events left in the author series. Just while we got the audience, we might as well plug our own.
Mr. Hakeem? I
Through
believe
your
at least
worship,
one or two.
Through Councillor Bodner, there's one more series on May 28th, actually, and that's that'll culminate for this season, and I believe we'll go through a process where we'll reestablish the network for the coming seasons as well. So it did do well this year, considering the transition. It did a marvelous job, and we enjoyed facilitating them.
Councillor Doucette?
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. There's no way I can beat that, but through you to Mr. Hanson, I noticed that in the items that we passed, we were talking about the sidewalks. I was just wondering if the southwest corner of Johnson and Athol was taken a look at. That was one that I had sent out to you about the fact that the condition of that sidewalk is absolutely horrible. It's low and falling apart. And I was just wondering if that had been observed and taken a look at and is on the list for repairs this year.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Councillor Doucette, we have taken note of that. It's in the review, Councillor Doucette, and we'll take that into consideration with the budget.
Councillor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to staff, I have two items that need to be addressed. One, and I believe this should go to Ron, it's having to do with the trail. And I've had two people come visit me in the during the last week complaining about dumping on the trail. Apparently there's a lot of dumping, and especially once you get to the east boundary of the JTL property and continuing eastward. So I'm not sure how people are getting out there with their items to dump, but we're talking everything from bits of asphalt to bags of garbage. So maybe able to be identified, I'm not sure, but we need to get on that. And the other thing was the general maintenance of the trail. There's a lot of discussion about how that needs to be cleaned up somewhat. Do we have a time when there will be any trimming or anything done on the trail?
Director Mr. Mayor. We do regular maintenance on it once the season's here. The sweeper was out on the trail last week, so the maintenance program has begun. The cutting program hasn't begun yet, so it's a bit early for that, but it's regularly maintained by our forces. So we also have weekly reviews as we do our road system. We have a weekly review of the trail system. We go by and look for any type problems on it and deal with those immediately. If anybody has any concerns similar to the dumping in the area, just let us know and we'll have somebody address it immediately.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
That's great, Ron. Thank you so much. I hope everybody that's listening tells their friends about that, because there's a general idea that the city doesn't go out onto the trails until the end of June, and I thought it might be a little different, so that does bear that out. My other item is about the committee dealing with winter works, with the snow clearing and that sort of thing. We talked about having a committee struck, but I've heard nothing about it. Can I get some idea where we're at with that?
Mr. Hanson, would you like to respond to that one?
Well, Mr. Mayor, I think the best thing to do probably to start it off is if Councillor Demery and myself were to meet and talk about timetables and structuring. I don't think there was a driver at the time that you raised the issue on who would actually form the committee and so on, but we'd be happy to do that, sit down with you and get that organized.
Okay, thank you so much, Ron. I do believe possibly Councillor Main or someone from the west side of Port might want to be involved with that as well.
Could we have a volunteer from the west side, Mr. Main?
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Mr. Main would love to be on that committee. Yeah. Mr. Hanson, a question. What are the penalties of individuals caught leaving refuse, building construction materials on the trail or on city streets? Mr. Aquilina, I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, or to you, Mr. Mayor, there is a $300 fine and surcharges if we can actually bring a prosecution forward to catching those individuals that are responsible, both on city property and as well as the region has a penalty system as well. But $300 is the reward that we offer.
$300 reward or $300 fine?
Sorry, $300 reward, Mr. Mayor, and there is a $300 fine plus the surcharges that would be levied against the individual that is prosecuted and found guilty.
I personally have had a number of complaints about, well, it's not an issue right now, but snowmobilers on the trails, horses on the trails, and some motorized vehicles, ATVs, motorbikes, motorcycles, etc. And I think we're going to have to take perhaps a more stringent look at what goes on there. I know it's difficult to catch people because they're gone before the call's put into the police, but it's not a good situation for those who are walking and using them for the purposes they were defined. Any other comments or questions of council? Are there any comments or questions, responses by members of staff? Okay, there being none, we'll move on to the adoption of the minutes of the 12th meeting regular of the Committee of the Whole on April 27th, 2015. Moved by Mr. Main, Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Doucette. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Now we perhaps should go back to the items, committee items requiring further discussion. Item number 3, it's just basically for a conflict of Councillor Kenny and myself.
Conflict by the mayor. I pull it because of you announced you had a conflict with it, and so therefore because of that it has to be pulled. And therefore, thank you, Your Worship. I appreciate this long one, but Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Service Division, report number 2015-81, subject letter of non-objection to the liquor license extension permission to erect a patio and waiver of variance fee for relief of noise bylaw for the Canadian Corps Association during Canal Days. 1, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne not object to the application by the Canadian Corps Association to the Alcohol and Gaming Commission of Ontario for a liquor license extension and patio extension as outlined in their attached correspondence dated February the 10th, 2015, and subject to the following conditions. A, that on Friday, July 31st, 2015, the selling and serving of liquor to the said licensed outdoor area shall occur only between the hours of 12 o'clock p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m., and the outdoor area shall be cleared of patrons by 2 o'clock a.m. on August the 1st, 2015. That on Saturday, August the 1st, 2015, the selling and serving of liquor to the said outdoor area shall occur only between the hours of 12 o'clock p.m. and 1 o'clock a.m., and the outdoor area shall be cleared of patrons by 2 o'clock a.m. on August the 2nd. In Your Worship, I'm not going to, that's the same thing for Sunday, August the 2nd, and then for Monday, August the 3rd, the selling of liquor to the said outdoor area shall occur between the hours of 12 o'clock p.m. and 6 o'clock p.m., and the outdoor area shall be cleared of patrons by 7 o'clock p.m. on August the 3rd, 2015. And E, notwithstanding clause A, B, and C, and D above, the outdoor license area occupying shall be open only when West Street is closed in accordance with the city bylaw. F, that the applicant shall provide police security during the hours of operation of the outdoor license area in accordance with requirements of the City of Port Colborne Special Events Division and the Niagara Regional Police Service. And G, that the applicant shall not block or occupy any street with equipment relating to Canal Days festivals and events or patio before 9 o'clock a.m. on Friday, July 31st, 2015, and must have all equipment and supplies related to the patio extension cleared from the streets no later than 10 o'clock p.m. on Monday, August the 3rd, 2015. And H, that the applicant shall provide a certificate of insurance with no less than $5 million liability in accordance with the Festival and Events 2015 insurance requirements in Appendix B, naming the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne as an additional insured, listing the Niagara Region Police Services and Police Services Board as an additional insured, and listing the St. Lawrence Seaway Management Corporation, Her Majesty the Queen, in right of Canada, an additional insured. And 2, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne waive the variance fee associated with the noise bylaw exemption at the Canadian Corps, 70 West Street, Port Colborne, as requested in the attached correspondence dated February the 10th, 2015.
Thank you. Mr. Main, I'm going to give up the chair so you can conduct the vote, because I've declared a conflict.
We have a seconder on this motion? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
Yeah, I was just going to say.
You might as well stay here. I believe that I have the next two, and they're both for the mayor's conflict. 5, the Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Services Division, report number 2015-84, subject Lakeshore Catholic High School Cancer Fundraising Walk. The recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne endorse this event and accept the correspondence received as information.
Seconder for that motion? Angie?
I just have one question, too, if I could.
Sure.
And I know all of you have read this. There was only one concern I had, and just because it is, you know, a fundraiser, not for the school, but for a cancer walk fundraiser. And one of the recommendations here, and I know we've always done that, it says that the event organizers can borrow certain city-owned equipment and materials such as picnic tables, garbage receptacles, barrier fencing, and all that other stuff. And that the organizer pay for any actual and additional cost incurred by the city for the transportation of materials, staff, and equipment time for the event. I guess I have a little problem with that, only because it is, you know, if there's a cost, because it is, I guess it's a walk for cancer, I just felt that that fee, or if there's any fee at all, could be waived. Not the fee if there's damage, but if there's a cost associated with moving benches and setting up, they said bring in receptacles, I think that should be waived because it is a charity event for funds raised for cancer. But that's just my opinion. If I'm sure there'll be anybody who can speak on that, that'd be great. Thank you, Deputy Mayor.
Any other comments? Mr. Bodner?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I guess just to that point about waiving those fees, I can remember some rather long discussions years ago on one was a car show that you know, we had helped. They were raising funds and donating it to good causes, and you know, it was felt that, you know, there was a cost for our staff to do all that, and just so they didn't get overwhelmed, there was to be a charge for it. So, you know, I don't think that charge is unreasonable, or that the expectation of that charge is unreasonable. And if we do it, you know, for one, we do it for everyone. So I wouldn't really be in favor of dropping that charge at this time.
Any other comments from council? Mr. Akeem?
For this particular event, there are no fees being charged in any way. That is, though, an important statement for us because of the fact that when we work with operations staff and the movement of goods and services outside normal working time, we're taking them away. There is some element of cost recovery that we have to consider, but it still comes back to the pleasure of council, obviously, to review and see. So It is something that is a standard approach when we take with events, and we're actually looking at packaging something that is going to help facilitate these particular types of events in the future. And we'll bring back a separate report to council to outline some of those conditions and perhaps operating protocols, just to streamline things and make it move along more easily.
Any other discussion? Councillor Kenny? You want to make that a motion?
No, I've already moved it, and thank you, Mr. Hakeem, for that explanation. That satisfies my inquiry. Thank you.
You have a seconder? Angie? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Item 6.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That the Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Services Division Report Number 2015-87, subject Sir John Port Colborne Youth Soccer Management Agreement Renewal and Financial Commitment. The recommendation is one, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approves the management lease agreement for the 2015 season between the City of Port Colborne and Sir John Colborne Youth Soccer Club. And 2, that the Council of the City of Port Colborne directs the City Clerk to prepare appropriate bylaw for Council approval, authorizing the Mayor and the City Clerk to execute and sign the management lease fee on behalf of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne. 3, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approves the financial commitment agreement between the City of Port Colborne and Sir John Colborne Youth Soccer Club. And 4, that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne directs the City Clerk to prepare the appropriate municipal bylaw for Council approval, authorizing the Mayor and City Clerk to execute and sign the financial commitment agreement on behalf of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne. And I pull this again, Deputy Mayor, just for the Mayor's conflict. Thank you.
Any other discussion? Seconder, Mr. Doucette? All in favor? Oh, you have a question. I'm sorry. Go for it.
Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hakeem. Since that's in my ward, I often get calls from people indicating that the lighted soccer field, the big one, right by the parking lot there, okay, the lights often stay on overnight or for long lengths of time in the night, to the point where some people at 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning, those lights are still open. I want to know who's paying for those lights, especially with the increase in hydro and everything else. If the agreement says they pay for it, well, it's their problem, and I don't like it, but if that's what they do, that's what they do. But that was a question last year that happened a lot. I haven't received any yet this year, but I received at least 5 calls last year where those lights, those large field lights, were left open and left on. Okay? So through you, Mr. Deputy Mayor, to Mr. Hakeem.
To your worship, acting worship, to Councillor Doucette. When the fields are booked, there's a user fee applied, and if there are lights, there is a fee for lights, and it varies depending on youth, adult, and any other organized group. So I know that the lights come on at a certain time. I know that we've discussed with the park staff about putting on some sort of timer, and we were having those discussions. We didn't get any direct complaints through us, and if we did, we would share them with the park staff, and I'm not sure vice versa if anything occurred. And if you've had complaints, then it would be warranted for us to know about them specifically, so we can know exactly when, because we have an actual schedule of all the bookings, so we know who and what and where are the culprits if it's necessary. But they do go off, if I'm not mistaken, I can double check, and maybe Ron can help me with this. They should be going off on an automatic basis around 11:30. I'm not certain though. Manual? Okay. If they're still manual, then there is an obligation on the user group to turn them off, because that's one of the arrangements that we make, because I think the staff are finished around 10:30 or at 11.
Mr. Doucette?
I have to apologize. You're not the one I went to. I went to our superintendent of operations and discussed it with him, but I thought I'd bring it up now. I think it's critical to understand that if they leave them on, it's going to be their charge because it's their responsible. And those lights are, if I remember right, they're aren't they mercury halogen or something like that? They're very large lights that are going to use up a lot of hydro. So, and I had at least 5 calls last year about that. So I want to make sure that that's not happening this year.
Mr. King?
Through your acting worship to Councillor Doucette, it's probably worthwhile then for me to maybe discuss it either with Ron or with his staff like Mike Grable or others in the parks area, because we did discuss getting automatic timers and I know they were investigating it, which would really, really benefit the user groups as well, because anybody can forget, but unfortunately it can happen. But we do charge a fee, just so you're aware, for those lights.
Councillor Bodnar? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
Councillor Bodnar, you had declared a conflict on number 7?
Yes, sir.
Okay. You as well? I'm sorry? Okay. Thank you, Madam Demeray. Could you move forward with the recommendation?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Mayor. For Councillor Bodner's conflict, Department of Community and Corporate Services, Community Services Division Report number 2015-89. Subject, Port Colborne Lions Club 14th Walk for Dog Guides, May 24th, 2015. That the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne approve the request for the Port Colborne Lions Club to hold their 14th Walk for Dog Guides on Sunday, May 24th, 2015, as submitted, subject to 1, that the Port Colborne Lions Club file of a certificate of insurance in the amount of $2 million minimum, naming the City of Port Colborne as an additional insured for the purpose of this event with the clerk. 2, that the Port Colborne Lions Club notify emergency services. 3, that the event organizers comply with the bylaw 4930/155/06, being a bylaw to provide for the licensing, control, and regulations of dogs with regards to dogs being on a leash and the picking up and disposal of dog feces. And 4, that the event organizers be responsible for ensuring the observance and compliance with all relevant highway and traffic regulations.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Butters? Or Councillor Kenny? Any questions? Being none, I'll call the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item number 9. Councillor Main.
Yes. This is not basically for discussion, but more or less recognition. Department of Community and Corporate Services, Corporate Service Division, report number 2015-92. Subject, Friends of Roselawn Center, Capital Trust Fund. That the City of Port Colborne approved the setting up of a capital trust fund named the Roselawn Center Capital Trust Fund for the purpose of a capital fundraising campaign administered by the Friends of Roselawn, with the funds to be expended for the preservation, restoration, and capital improvements of the Roselawn Center. That the treasurer for the City of Port Colborne issue the appropriate income tax receipts for all donations received into the Roselawn Center Capital Trust Fund. That all recommendations for the expenditure of funds be reported to Council for approval upon the consultation with the Roselawn Center facility staff and the Port Colborne Heritage Committee.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Butters? All those in favor? Questions? Yes, Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just to comment on this, here's a perfect example of something that was started very slowly, gained traction, and now with Mr. Hakim's help and his staff has really blossomed into something that is continuing to grow. And how many years have we been trying to get a fund set up to help restore the Roselawn? And here it is. So start slow, gain some momentum, takes a few years, but here it is. So congratulations to Friends of Roselawn for, continuing to move ahead.
Any other comments or questions? Councillor Main?
Yes, I agree with Councillor Bodnar. It's a good thing when we have people step up to do a project like this and not be a burden on the taxpayer. It's kind of a growing thing. It's the same as Pokemar. Now it's the Roselawn. So let's just hope the momentum keeps going. It's a very, very good idea.
There being no further comments or questions, then I would call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Item number 12, Councillor Kenny, I believe that was yours.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Department of Planning and Development Report number 2015-85, subject proposed development and easement agreements for Lucendo and Rosemary Pambianco of 650 Barrack Road. One, that council enter into a development agreement with Luciendo and Rosemary Pambianco attached hereto as Appendix B. 2, that the council pass a bylaw attached hereto as Appendix A, authorizing the mayor and the clerk to execute the development agreement. 3, that the council approves the granting of the easement known as Appendix D and enters into an agreement with Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco for the purpose of a private force main. And 4, that Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco be so notified.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councillor Desmarais? Any comments or questions? Yes, Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I just have a couple of questions through you, Mayor, to Mr. Aquilina first. Mr. Aquilina, I believe when this was first brought to council as that there was a question in regards to this private force main and the easement required, and I thought at that meeting that it was stated at that planning meeting before a regular council meeting that that would not be allowed, that the force main would not be allowed on that property. I had a couple questions from people this week, and I just want to have that clarified. Thank you.
Through Mr. Mayor to Councillor Kenny, no, at the public meeting for the zoning change, it was clear that there would be no cost to the taxpayers, that it was going to be privately serviced, and Mr. Pambianco is doing that through the development agreement. There'd be no cost to the municipality, but the force main is required because the services need to be extended to these two properties because it's within the urban area boundary.
Any other questions or comments?
Thank you. And then through you, Mayor, to Mr. Hansen. Mr. Hansen, I had a couple of questions from neighboring properties in regards to this force main, and they wanted to know about the noise that would be created by that. Would there be a pumping station to force this out? And if there is, they wanted to know how much noise that was going to make. And I noticed, just one more question, I'll just roll it all into everything. In the report, it states the owner, which was at the Pambiancos, shall deposit with the city prior to the execution of this agreement a cash deposit, letter of credit, or certified check in the amount of $30,000 satisfactory to the treasurer, upon which the city may draw funds without the consent of the owner to cover the cost of installation of the force main shown in Schedule B. So obviously that's what they need to service these properties, and we're going to have $30,000, but the neighbors that called me were concerned about any noise that would be caused. And if you could address that, that would be great.
Here, Mr. Mayor. There'll be absolutely no noise from this. This is an underground force main. Low pressure sanitary sewer force mains are very common. They're used in a lot of different areas where gravity sewers are not deep enough to pick up areas. There's actually whole subdivisions in places that use this type of technology. The pumps should be enclosed within the homes themselves. It's usually a small enclosed pumping station, submersible pumps that will pump to this force main. It will be underground to the manhole, the nearest manhole on Barrack Road. So there should be no impact from a noise point of view.
Thank you, Mr. Hanson.
Thank you. I hope they're listening, because they said they were going to. But I do have two people from the neighborhood here. I'm not sure if Mr. Edwards would like to address council. If they do it,
I think there has been
I'd
a
ask.
request that Mr. Edwards address council.
Yes.
Could I have a mover
I'll
and a seconder
move that.
to dispense with the procedural bylaw to allow Mr. Edwards to come forward? Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Butters. Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Mr. Edwards, could you come forward, please, and perhaps give us your full name and your address, sir? Yes, put that little red button there. Thank you.
My name's George Edwards. Council members, Your Honour. I live directly, is there a map going to go up here, or of this piece of property, the said properties? Is there going to be a map being able to brought up, which is on like this one?
We'll just
just to fill everyone in a little bit, because I know Your Honour, you weren't there, and I don't think Councillor Main was there. There's a main lateral for this sewer 400 feet away from this two said properties, part 1 and 2. Because the lateral is so high, the flow is going the opposite way from that lateral, heading west on Barrack Road. 2 previous meetings we went to, one for the severance, one for change of the bylaw. Without going into a whole bunch of details, it was understood by me and a lot of other property owners and most of you council members, the only way, and this was said by the engineer and the planning department, the only way that was going to be hooked up was for that sewer to be extended in front of each property, a pumping station at the end of Barrack Road on Minor Road to pump it up. The price was so high, it was never expected. Everybody, all of us, I talked to a couple of different council members, different property. There's no way in 1,000 years people, the pumping station alone, as I said before, was $1 million, plus we installed the sewer lines. All of a sudden, there's been a change. I didn't know about this meeting until yesterday. There's been a change. We're now applying for a device to be, for the sewer to be pumped uphill on city property to be joined to this is, what I understand is, this is what you, the council, this is what you have approved that you'd like to see go forward. Am I correct? The engineer department and the planning department, you're applying to get allowance to go onto city property to pump the sewer to the main lateral. Is this what I understanding?
Mr. Hanson, could you comment on that inquiry?
Mr. Mayor, I've spoke to Mr. Edwards a couple times about this issue at the counter. One of the alternatives to provide sanitary services in this area would be a gravity sewer, which would run, because as you can see from the profile, the ground runs from the west to the east, falls away, and that's why this gravity sewer and manhole is so shallow. The alternative for that would be to put a gravity sewer in running westerly to Minor Road and then have a large pumping station there. The only, and as I explained to Mr. Edwards, the only way that would happen is if you had additional development in the Barrick Minor Road area, and that would get the ball rolling in terms of having additional servicing there. That's not feasible, as Mr. Edwards has said, that's not feasible because of the cost, unless you had a full development to support it. The alternative for these two severances, since they're in the urban area, were to create a force main from the two lots to the manhole, which is east of the two parcels. So in fact, what you have here in this report is a design prepared by VNS Engineering of a force main system. The pumps would be enclosed in the houses, low pressure sanitary sewer system, and those would pump the sewage up to the manhole that's on Barrick Road. That can be termed to be a temporary measure if the sanitary sewer system that we've discussed were to be constructed at some point in time. Then you could remove these force mains and actually have a gravity sewer system. Until that time, force mains are the only way to convey the sewage from these two lots to the manhole. That was always our understanding with the severances.
Anybody have any questions of Mr. Hanson? Councilor Butters?
So these pumps, who will actually own the pumps so that when they need to be replaced, for example, who would be responsible for that type of scenario? And I know that they're designed to last a long time and whatever. I mean, we have a pumping station at our place because it has to get pumped to where it has to get pumped to. So I understand that. So is it a similar type of thing in a residential rural area? Is it a similar kind of operation?
Director Hanson?
Through you, Mr. Mayor. Yes, that's exactly what it is. The pumps and the little pumping facility that would be enclosed at the house are owned by the owner of the home. So any change in the ownership of the home, the requirements for the force mains, the maintenance of the force mains, there's no obligation on the city to do any maintenance on the system. It's fully with the homeowners, the owners of the property. That would be transferred to any new owners of the property in the future.
And by the same token, there'd be no cost to any neighbor either. There's no cost to the municipality, then there would be no added cost to any neighbor of this property, correct?
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mr. Edwards, was that your concern, that the city would be picking up the cost?
that was one of my concerns. My concern is this is all that sudden, this is what's just been brought forward. None of this was brought forward at the last meeting. Something I don't like that. We should have known. You council members should have known if there was if something was going to be done at that time when it was voted on. It was suggested by Hale,
Mr. Hale?
I'm sorry, Hale, I'm sorry. If there was going to be something, it might be an idea to let the other homeowners know from this point west, heading west, because none of those people have sewers, they're not on the sewers. And there was talk that because this is a lot cheaper, this pumping system you're talking about, than putting in a sewer line with a pumping station, I know to my east, there's a guy there with 2 lots which he wants to go on. He'd like to be hooked up to the sewers. If I'm going to be faced with, I'm just saying, postage-sized lots that I got to look at. I didn't move there to do that, but that's beside the point. Maybe I want to split my property up into 4 parcels, 4 severances, and bite the bullet and get out of Dodge, I guess. It might be an idea before the council makes any important decisions to just think about notifying the other homeowners and seeing any of us want to get in on this. And maybe it'll save Lou a bunch of money too, and everybody else. Something to look at. I think it's only fair that we're given a chance, because this has only just come up all of a sudden. This was never brought up before tonight about this. We were all under the understanding that there was going to be a pumping station, and the sewer line was going to go right from one end of Barrack Road to the other. We were all under those, that's what we thought, that's what we were told. I looked at the tape 3 times today, and that's what was said. So,
okay,
thank you.
Councilor Demery?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to Mr. Hanson. Ron, if, as Mr. Edwards said, other neighbors may want to do the same kind of thing and put a pumping station in to allow their properties to go into that sewer system, could that be done on an individual basis, or does it have to be all be done at one time?
Mr. Aquilina?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Demery. The one thing, when you look at lot development, especially to the south of Barrack Road, that is development zone property that needs to be further studied by way of secondary plan. The application that was before council, before the Committee of Adjustment, you may recall it was a residential development zone. The zoning was changed for this particular property to facilitate these 2 lots. Looking holistically of the entire area, the proper way to do that is by way of a secondary plan where all of the neighbors and property owners are involved, coming up with a schematic plan. Engineering's at the table, planning's at the table, and coming together to an actual plan to develop the entire area. There is a cost. And this individual property owner wanted to move forward with 2 lots. Nothing's been before council to, actually, yes, there was something before council in the mid-2000s, and it was determined that, tried to come up with some conclusion that the property owners can actually agree to actually hire and retain a consultant, an engineer, a planner, to develop the plan and have all the property owners agree to that. That never happened. There was no agreement with any property owners, and we're talking to the south of Barrack Road, where those lots were all vacant, large tracts of land. So the proper way to do so is by a secondary plan for the entire area.
Can I say something on that, I'm sorry.
Just a minute, Mr. Edwards. Councilor Main?
Just a couple thoughts. If this force main pumps it to the, you say the manhole, is that the tipping point for the gravity, or do we have to go beyond that?
Director Hanson?
Mr. Mayor, if you scroll down, or scroll up, I guess in this case, please, you can see the plan profile drawing. Just go up one more. Yeah, right there. You can see, Councilor Main, on that plan that's in front of you, you can see the last manhole that's shown on the right side of that profile. That's the tipping point, as you said, that's a break in land. So everything from that point goes easterly to Highway 58, and you can see from the ground profile, everything is running to the west towards Minor Road. So by a gravity system, that's as far, the city extended this system back in the 90s, early 90s. That's as far as the system can go in terms of a gravity system. Anything beyond there would have to be pumped. So these severances, the approval of these severances was strictly contingent on having the sewage pumped to that last manhole that you see on the profile.
Okay, thank you. My second question is, the way I understand this, and this is new to me, this basically could turn out just to be a temporary fix for these 2 lots, because Mr. Aquilino said when the development takes on Minor Road and in behind the mall and that, then you'll have to put a pumping station in, will you not? Is that how that works?
Through Mr. Mayor, that's correct. We actually had development proposals along the Minor Road area going back several years. They didn't come to fruition, but if they ever were coming forward to council, that would mean a pumping station, gravity sewers running westerly towards Minor Road, and then a pumping station bringing it back to the system. That's the way this system or any smaller force mains would then be eliminated once that system is built.
Mr. Edwards, you had a comment?
Yeah, I'm only going to take a couple of minutes and I'm out of here. At the first meeting we went to get severance for the lots, we were told by the planning department and the other fellow, so it's an age thing. We were told that to to sever those two pieces of property and to be able to build on those two pieces of property, those lots had to be serviced. Fair enough, that's how it should be. I was shocked when those two pieces of property were allowed to be severed without being serviced first. So they were allowed to be severed. Along came the next meeting, changed the bylaw so they could make preparations to be built, houses. It passed. To my amazement, it passed. I said to all these council members, I said, as far as I'm concerned, that's wrong. I said, that's like putting the cart before the horse. And I said, I don't want to go as far as to say this is letting somebody through the back door. At that time, Councillor Steele took offense and told me off. You know, so be it. That is putting the cart before the horse. I think it's wrong. I think if somebody wants, when someone buys a piece of property and they know the laws and they know the bylaws, they're told that they can't build a house on that piece of property unless it's serviced. That's the way it should be. You've allowed somebody to get a severance. You've allowed somebody to get the bylaw changed. And all of a sudden we're going for pumping. Who on earth would ever want to buy a piece of property? We're going to pump the sewers up to the main. I don't know how anyone could even think about buying a piece of property like that. And all of a sudden we're allowing this to happen? There's something wrong with that. If a piece of property has to be developed and it's calling for sewers and services, put it in and then build it. It's that easy. It's common sense. I don't mean to offend anybody. I don't want to get carried away. That's all I have to say. So.
Thank you, Mr. Edwards, for your comments. Councillor Main?
Just another quick thought.
You're directing this to?
Through you to Mr. Hanson. Now, the city water line, how far does it go past those lots? Are we serviced with water right to the minor road?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, yes, the services, the time the sanitary sewer was put in the early 90s, the water main was extended because it's not dependent on gravity, obviously. It's extended all the way to Minor Road. So the water services are available to all the properties right to Minor Road.
Okay, so second part of my question. We have city water in front of those two lots as it is right now.
Yes.
What would be the difference? The force main probably would work better because are the lot sizes large enough to put a self-contained system on the lot sizes?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, the septic systems aren't allowed within the urban area. They have to be serviced with the force mains, with the pump system.
Okay. Councillor Kenny, did you have your hand up?
I did, Mr. Mayor, because like I said, I had several calls from different neighbors asking, because this thing had totally changed it for them, like Mr. Edwards said. He was under the impression, as I was, I thought it would never get developed because I didn't know that this was an alternate plan. I had never heard of a plan for these two properties that they would be able to put a pumping, whatever you want to call it, station within the home to pump the sewer from their home to the road. Honestly, I did not hear that. And so I had several calls because they said, well, how come we weren't notified of that change? When they came to that meeting, it was under their understanding that it would have to go to a pumping station would have to go in near Barrack to do that, and now that hasn't happened. And they said, well, when changes are made, aren't they notified? And apparently, one of them called, spoke to Shannon, and Shannon said that because it is a development that they don't have to send notices out. But I think that really bothered the neighborhood, that notification was not given to them. I think they felt that they should be told that there's going to be these pumping stations within the house themselves, and that's how that development's going through. But they were not under that understanding when that first came to a meeting here, this very last meeting we had for this particular development. So perhaps Mr. Aquilina could address that and tell me, was that ever mentioned in the previous meeting? Because maybe I have.
Through your worship to
Director Aquilina.
Yeah, through your worship to Councillor Kenny, going back to when the original applications were made for severances, we had comments from engineering. It was a known fact that those properties need to be serviced by urban services. They cannot be on a septic system. Committee of Adjustment had that information, approved the severances, and also a requirement was to then change the zoning of the property. Responding back to the earlier comment from Mr. Edwards, that is what the development, I don't want to say game, that is a known fact. You buy property, you have to service it. Same deal with when you have a plan to subdivision application. You first get draft plan approval. You don't put the pipes in the ground, get the draft plan approval, you then put the pipes in the ground, and then you get your final plan approval. Severances are the exact same thing. It's a conditional approval. One of the conditions in this case was that it needs to be serviced by a municipal system. What we have before us is an actual municipal system that was designed and approved by engineering. Fact of the matter is it is a municipal system, but it's not a private system. When the zoning change was made, there were comments made as well from engineering in support of the application. And now today before us, we now have a system that has been reviewed and approved by engineering to facilitate 2 lots being developed within the urban area boundary.
Councilor Butters?
I think that a big part of the problem here is that, you know, that the residents of that neighborhood came, you know, took time out to come to a public meeting and then feel like they're kind of sideswiped in a way because now a plan has come up to service these lots. But the neighborhood, who start out at a public meeting process, then seems to get cut off, and they're no longer part of the process of whatever the solution is. That, you know, I appreciate engineering's come up with a plan and all that kind of stuff. But it's like the neighbors are sitting back going, well, I took time out of my life to come to a public meeting back several months ago, and then they're not part of that process where a solution is being devised or has been come up with, and they don't get notified of you know, what the next plan is. And I kind of can understand why it would leave a pretty sour taste in your mouth if you lived on that Barrack Road area and weren't kept in that loop of information. And whether or not it's required under the Planning Act, I think it would kind of just make sense to keep people in that loop, especially people who signed a sheet for the public meeting, you know, to be sent a letter laying it out. This is a solution that engineering has come up with to properly service these lots. Maybe there wouldn't be that kind of filling a button of heads here had they been kept in the loop of information. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Any other comments or questions? There being none, I call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Item number 18. Thank you, Councillor Demery.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm lifting this for the conflict, for Councillor Butter's conflict. Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56, the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56 request for temporary extension of patio license for an event to be held on May 23rd, 2015. Recommendation that the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne does not object to the application for a temporary license extension to an existing license held by the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56 located at 67 Clarence Street, Port Colborne, for an event being held on May 23rd, 2015, as outlined in the correspondence dated April 22nd, 2015.
For a seconder? Councillor Doucette. Any comments or questions? Call for the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Are there any notices of motion this evening, Madam Clerk? Anyone else have a notice of motion, members of council? Being none, I entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Councillor Kenny, seconded by Councillor Desmarais. All those in favor? Carried. Meeting is adjourned. This time I'd like to move on to our regular council meeting agenda for Monday, May 11th. Call the meeting to order. Are there any addendum items?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. There is one addendum item this evening, item 18 on the agenda, correspondence from the Royal Canadian Legion requesting approval for a patio extension.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. We have a motion to confirm the agenda. Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Kenny. Any questions or comment? All those in favor? Carried. Are there any disclosures of interest? Councillor Butters?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item number 18, I'll declare indirect pecuniary interest as I'm a member of the Royal Canadian Legion Branch 56.
Thank you. Councillor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 7, as I'm a member of the Lions Club.
Are there any others other than myself? Then I would declare a conflict of interest on items. Looking in front of her. 357? 356. Any others? Councillor Kenny?
I'll pull item 12 for a recorded vote. Thank you.
Item 12, recorded vote. Okay. Again, I have declared a conflict because of on item number 3, I'm a member of the association. Item 5, because my daughter is organizing that fundraiser. Item 6, because another son is on the board of Sir John Colborne Youth Soccer Club. Can we have a motion to adopt all other items not requiring consideration? Moved by Councillor Main, seconded by Councillor Butters. All those in favor? Carried. I'll move on to the consideration of those items requiring separate discussion. Shall we start with number 12? Councillor Kenny?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just got to go back to that now. No, I got here. I just got to go back. Pardon me? Yes, I just... I have it here. I got it. Patience, my sisters.
I got it right here, please.
I know, but you know me, I'm stubborn. You should know that.
Okay.
She's being stubborn.
Well, I just gotta... Thank you, Your Worship. The Department of Planning and Development, report number 2015-85, subject proposed development and easement agreement, Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco, 650 Barrack Road. One, that the council enter into a development agreement with Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco attached hereto as Appendix B. 2, that council pass a bylaw attached hereto as Appendix A, authorizing the mayor and the clerk to execute the development agreement. 3, that the council approves the granting of an easement shown in Appendix D and enters into an agreement with Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco for the purpose of a private force main. And 4, that Luciano and Rosemary Pambianco be so notified.
Is there a seconder for that recommendation? Councilor Doucette? Any discussion? Councilor Bodnar?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you to, I guess, either Dan or Ron. I had a feeling that Mr. Edwards alluded to the fact that there was something wrong done by staff, and I wouldn't want that out there in the public. So through you, Mr. Mayor, I'd like to ask whoever would like to answer that. Was the process followed, and was there anything done out of the ordinary in this process?
Through Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bodnar, no, nothing was done out of the process. It was all vetted by staff, and we brought forward the recommendation report, and everything is kosher.
Any other comments or questions? You requested a recorded vote? And then call for the question, please. All those in favor? No.
Recorded vote.
Okay, record.
I'll read the names of each councillor in alphabetical order. Please indicate either yes or no to the motion on the floor. Councillor Bodnar?
Yes.
Councillor Butters?
No.
Councillor Danch is absent. Councillor Demaray?
Yes.
Councillor Doucette?
Yes.
Councillor Elliott is absent. Councillor Kenny?
No.
Mayor Maloney?
Yes?
Councillor Main?
Yes.
The motion is carried.
Thank you. Councilor Bodnar, was number 7 your conflict with the Lions Club? Could someone call that question? Recommendation? Yeah.
I did, but
Your
there's
Worship.
3 first.
Your Worship, there are 3 items. Do they all have to, through you to the clerk, do they all have to be read again into
Items
the record?
3, 5, and
The
7.
ones that we have already voted on, they have to be read again or just pulled?
Thank
for
you,
the
Mr. Mayor.
Thank you.
If there's general consensus amongst council, it's perfectly fine for you to dispense with the reading of the recommendations.
And that would be items 3, 5, and 6.
Yes.
And 7 and 18, and 7 and 18 as well.
Okay. And 18?
7,
Councilor,
18, 2, 5, and 6.
Councilor Main, could you take the chair again, please?
I can. We have a seconder, right? Angie's seconder. Okay.
And Ron can vote on 3, 5, 6, but not 7.
So 3, 5, 6, I elected Angie seconded for the conflict for the mayor. 3, 5, and 6 for the mayor.
Okay, we'll vote on 3, 5, and 6. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Angie. Now, what are the other ones we're doing? One and...
7 is Ron's contract.
7 are Ronnie, Jonathan Jacob.
Ron can come back on Tuesday.
Go ahead, Councilor Main.
Okay. Okay, do we have a seconder for 7 and 8? B?
You have to do them separately because there's 2 different people.
Okay, for number 7. All in favor? Who's got the second? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Number 8.
18.
Okay, 18. Oh, yes.
It's for Barb.
Okay, this is just for you, right, Barb?
Yes, it's for Barb. I'm moving it.
Okay, moved by Angie, seconded by B. All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried.
You need to join us, things, we need to have less kids.
Too late for that.
Too late, way too late. Something to be less active.
Okay, thank you again, Councillor Main. Proclamations. June is Seniors Month. We'd like to perhaps have a mover and a seconder, and the proclamation is, whereas the Ontario Senior Secretariat has designated June as Seniors Month, and whereas this is a time to celebrate and honor seniors, their knowledge, experience, and the contributions they have made every day in communities across the province. Now therefore, I, Mayor John Mullane, proclaim the month of June as Seniors Month in the city of Port Colborne. Moved by Councillor Desmarais, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those, any questions or comments? All those in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Minutes of the board of the Port Colborne Gateway Business Improvement Area Board of Management meeting of April 14th are before you, April 14th, 2015. We have a motion to approve those minutes. Councillor Bodner, seconded by Councillor Main. Any comments or questions? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Any notices of motion this evening? Being none, we have 3 bylaws to be, actually more than 3, number of bylaws to be considered, introduced, considered, and passed. Madam Clerk?
Your Worship, if
Excuse me, we have a...
we could separate the last one, Your Worship.
Okay. Yes. Yes. Okay, I have to rise from the chair again. Councillor Main.
Okay, here we are. Be back on number 5. Okay.
All right.
That the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 62356115 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a management lease agreement renewal with the Sir John Colborne Youth Club regarding the operation and maintenance of the TA land and soccer fields located on Elizabeth Street, and bylaw 62366215 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a financial commitment agreement between the City of Port Colborne and the Sir John Colborne Youth Soccer Club for the cost of 4 new soccer fields and field house at TA Land and Sports Complex.
Do we have a mover? B? Do we have a seconder? Barbara? All in favor? Opposed, if any? Carried. Say it again.
Madam Clerk? Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the following bylaws be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 62335915 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a lease agreement renewal with the Port Colborne Minor Hockey Association for the Valley Health and Wellness Center. Bylaw 62346015 being a bylaw to temporarily close a section of West Street to vehicular traffic June 27, 2015 for the purposes of the 5th Annual Art Crawl. Bylaw 62376315 being a bylaw to set up a trust fund for the purpose of a capital fundraising campaign to be administered by the Friends of Roselawn to be expended for the preservation, restoration, and capital improvements of the Roselawn Center. Bylaw 62386415 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with Rankin Construction regarding tender 2015-11 citywide road resurfacing. And finally, bylaw 62396515 being a bylaw to authorize entering into a contract agreement with CTC Contracting regarding tender 2015-10 citywide sidewalk construction.
Any comments or questions? Call for the questions. All those in favor? Or, I thought they were mover. Councillor Kenny, seconder, Councillor Main. Again, comments or questions? There being none, call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 62406615, being a bylaw to authorize entering into a development agreement for part of Lot 32, Concession 2, municipally known as 650 Barrack Road.
Okay. Mover and a seconder. Councillor Deveray, Councillor Main, comments or questions? Call for the question. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Have the confirmatory bylaw.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. That the following bylaw be read 3 times and finally passed. Bylaw 62416715, being a bylaw to adopt, ratify, and confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the City of Port Colborne at its regular meeting of May 11th, 2015.
All those, call for the question. All those in favor? Mover and a seconder. Councillor, it's been a bad night. Main, seconded by Councillor Doucette. All those in favor? Carried. At this time, I'd entertain a motion to go into closed session. Councillor Doucette. Councillor Kenny. You don't wish. Where are we? The items would be minutes of the closed session portion of the April 27, 2015 regular council meeting and May 4th, 2015 special council meeting. A verbal report from the Chief Administrative Officer concerning the recruitment process for hiring of a Chief Administrative Officer pursuant to the Municipal Act 2001-239, Sub 2, Sub D, Labor Relations or Employee Negotiations. A verbal report from the Chief Administrative Officer concerning the Niagara Regional Broadband Network pursuant to Municipal Act 2001, subsection 2392A, the security of the property of the municipality or local board, and 2392E, litigation or potential litigation, including matters before administrative tribunals affecting the municipality or local board. Any comments or questions? Mover and a seconder. Councillor Main and Councillor Butters? Sure. All those in favor? Carried. Okay, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, for being with us tonight.